We were high school sweethearts, me and her. Went to the same college too. Got married young, at 20, because we thought we were each other's world. When I turned 23, we had our first kid, a girl. Times were tough, but we managed to crawl our way up to a decent life, middle class, you know? Things took a turn when my brother got divorced. It was a rough patch for him, so I did what family does, offered him our spare room. It was 2006, and he needed help. We were happy to, at least, that's what I thought. Not long after, my wife and my brother started getting too close for comfort. They were always texting, chatting on the phone when he wasn't around. It felt off. I told her it bothered me, but she made it seem like I was making a big deal out of nothing. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it just wouldn't go away. Then, it got to the point where they didn't even bother hiding it. That hit me hard. I mean, I was right there. But every time I brought it up, it was like I was the one in the wrong for even thinking it. I couldn't just stand by. One night, I checked her phone. The messages I found. They were beyond friendly. It felt like a punch to the gut. Everything inside me just broke. I had to do something. So, I called them out, sat them both down. They swore up and down it was just some stupid texts, nothing physical. I wanted to believe them, needed to, for the sake of our family. But that was the beginning of the end, really. From that moment, nothing was the same. They said it was nothing, but it sure as hell didn't feel like nothing to me. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through the TV channels, not really watching anything. My mind was elsewhere. My wife, Sarah, was upstairs, probably on her phone. My brother, Mike, had moved in with us a few months back. He was out, said he had some errands. Things had been weird lately. Sarah and Mike were getting too close for comfort. Laughing too much, whispering. It bugged me. I decided to shake it off, thinking I was being paranoid. We've been together since high school. Sarah and we've been through so much to get here, to a good life with our kids. One day, everything changed. I found Sarah's phone on the kitchen table while she was showering. A message popped up, from Mike. Something inside me snapped. I opened the message. It was like getting punched in the gut, sexting, back and forth. My world crumbled right there. I waited until Mike got home. We need to talk. All of us, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah looked scared. Mike, defiant. Sitting in the living room, the air thick with tension, I threw the phone on the table. Explain this, I demanded. They exchanged glances, then the lies came. It's not what it looks like, Sarah started. Nothing physical happened, Mike added quickly. I wanted to scream, to throw them both out, but I thought of our daughter, the life we built. I'm trying to keep us together, I said, voice cracking. But this breaks me. They swore it would stop. I tried to believe them, for the sake of our family. We moved on, or so I thought. We even had another daughter, life seemed to get back on track. Then, a small lie from Sarah reignited my suspicions. Pressing her, the truth came out slowly, like poison. More intimate than just texts, but they still denied going all the way. It felt like déjà vu, but worse. I was stuck. Tearing my family apart over something that happened years ago seemed insane. But living with the lie felt like dying slowly. I had to confront this, had to fight for some semblance of respect, if not for me, then for our daughters. So there we were, in the same living room where years of lies had unfolded, facing the ugly truth. My family, my whole life, teetering on the edge of a decision I never wanted to make. Last night was the breaking point. I was sitting on our bed, flipping through an old photo album. It's funny how pictures can bring back memories you thought were buried deep. That's when my wife walked in, her face all smiles until she saw what I was holding. Her smile vanished, and that's when I knew. I needed the truth, but I was scared of what it might be. I found this old picture of you and my brother at the lake, I said, holding up a photo. You two looked really close. She tried to brush it off, saying they were just having fun, but her voice was shaky. That's when I decided to push for more. There's something going on, isn't there? Between you and him? At first, she denied everything. But I could see it in her eyes, the guilt. It took hours, but finally, she broke down. She admitted to more than just friendly texts and calls. They had crossed lines I never thought possible. I felt like my heart stopped. It was like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Was it just texting? Tell me the truth. Her confession was like a punch to the gut. She talked about kissing, touching. More than I could bear to hear. My brother. My wife. How could they? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I just kept replaying their betrayal over and over in my head. By morning, I had made up my mind. I had to confront my brother. I called him, demanding answers. He tried to dodge the questions, his story full of holes and, I don't remembers. It was clear they were both lying to me, not just now but for years. That's it. We're done. You and me, we're done. I told him, my voice cold, feeling nothing but emptiness inside. After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with a crushing weight of sadness. It was over, but at what cost? My wife tried to explain, to say it was a one-time mistake, but how could I believe anything she said now? Every word felt like another lie. I swear it was just that one time, she pleaded, tears in her eyes. But the trust we had was shattered into a million pieces. I've made my decision. I can't look at either of them the same way again. My brother is out of my life for good, and as for my wife, I just don't know. The future we had, our plans, our dreams, it all feels like a distant memory now. Tonight, I'm sleeping in the guest room. It feels like the only place I can breathe, away from the lies and the betrayal. Tomorrow, I don't know what I'll do. But I know one thing. Life as I knew it is over. It was a Thursday morning, just like any other, until it wasn't. The air felt heavier, and the silence in the house was deafening. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. The events of the last few days replayed in my mind, each detail sharper than a knife edge. My wife, the woman I had loved and built a life with for over 2 decades, sat across from me. Her eyes, once full of warmth, now held a different kind of daze, one of guilt and desperation. I swear, it was over years ago. Can't we just move past this? Her voice was a mix of pleading and defiance. I wanted to believe her, part of me still did. But the truth was like a gaping wound, and her words were nothing more than a flimsy bandage. How can I trust anything you say? I asked, my voice steady but my heart racing. Every time we talk, another lie comes out. She opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by my phone buzzing on the table. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize, but the content was unmistakable: pictures, dates, places. Evidence of not one, but multiple encounters. My heart sank. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I can't do this anymore, I said, standing up so quickly that my chair nearly toppled over. Her face went pale, the realization of what was happening dawning on her. I'm going to see a lawyer. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and hard conversations. Telling our daughters was the hardest part. Their confusion and hurt were palpable, a physical ache in the room with us. My family, her family, we let everyone know. The truth, ugly and raw, couldn't be hidden any longer. She moved her things to the basement, a temporary arrangement until something more permanent could be figured out. The house, once full of laughter and warmth, felt like a shell of its former self. But it was mine to keep, a small consolation in the wake of everything else. I made my decision. The marriage was over, and it was time to move forward, however daunting that path might seem. There was no going back, not after everything that had come to light. The betrayal was too deep, the lies too numerous. In the days that followed, I found strength I didn't know I had. The support from friends, family, and even strangers online was overwhelming. You're making the right choice, they said. You'll get through this. And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe it. As I looked around the now half-empty house, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. A painful, difficult beginning, but a chance to build something new. For myself, for my daughters. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was resolved to walk it, one step at a time. No dramatic goodbyes, no tearful apologies. Just the quiet determination to rebuild, to find happiness again in the aftermath of betrayal. It was time to move forward, to close this chapter of my life and start writing a new one. Story number 2. I was feeding the baby when my phone beeped. It was a Facebook message from a name I didn't recognize. My heart sank the moment I read it. Your husband has been seeing my wife. Just like that, my world stopped. I couldn't believe it. Only 2 weeks after our youngest was born in March 2021, while I was drowning in diapers and night feeds, he was with her. We've been married for 8 years, had 2 sons. Our oldest was barely 2 when the youngest came along. My husband, before our first was born, promised he'd cut back on overnight work trips. He didn't. Those trips got more frequent, and the FaceTime calls we used to have stopped right after our first son was born. It made sense now, the early departures, late returns during visits to my parents. Always said it was work, but work didn't explain the distance. And then to find out she lived just 10 minutes from my parents' place. It was too much. I confronted him that night. He didn't deny it, didn't apologize. Just sat there, looking anywhere but at me. I remember asking, why? But all he said was, I don't know. That was it. No explanation, no remorse. Nothing. The next day was a blur. I called my mom, tears streaming down my face, asking if we could come stay with them for a while. She didn't hesitate, of course, come home. Packing up, I tried to make sense of it all. How did we get here? How did I not see this coming? I thought back to the promises he made before our first son was born, how excited we were to be parents together. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now, here I was, trying to figure out how to tell our oldest that we were going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a bit. It's funny, how life throws these curveballs. One minute you're planning birthdays and holidays, and the next, you're packing bags, shielding your kids from a reality they're too young to understand. I was angry, heartbroken, but most of all, I was determined to protect them, to make sure they knew they were loved, no matter what. Driving to my parents' house, I replayed the last few months in my head, his late nights, the missed calls, the unexplained absences. It all added up now. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. It was going to be a long road ahead, but at that moment, all I could think about was getting to my parents, getting my boys to safety. That was all that mattered. I remember the day it all came crashing down. It was an ordinary Thursday, but by the end of it, my whole world had shifted. I was at work, buried in paperwork, when my phone lit up with a message from her, "We need to talk." That's when I knew it was over. She had found out about the affair. The weeks leading up to that moment were tense. I kept starting arguments over nothing, blaming her for being depressed all the time. She was struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety, stuff she got after our youngest was born. It was tough, seeing her like that, and I guess I didn't handle it well. I threw around the word, divorce, like it was nothing, trying to scare her into feeling something, anything. Then came the call from the app's husband. He told her everything. I wasn't there when it happened, but I can imagine the look on her face, the betrayal, the hurt. I expected screaming, crying, maybe even things thrown my way when I got home. But there was none of that. Just silence and a look that cut deeper than any words could. I want a divorce, I said, finally, when the silence got too much. We need to sell the house. I thought I'd feel relieved, saying it out loud, but I felt empty. It was like declaring the end of something I wasn't even sure I wanted to end, but it was too late for doubts. The next thing I knew, she was gone, moved in with her parents, taking the kids with her. Her parents. They never liked me much, even less now. Banned from their house, cut off from my sons, it hit me then, the gravity of what I'd done. In those first few nights alone, the house felt eerily silent. No kids laughing, no late-night talks, no sounds of life. Just me and my thoughts, replaying every argument, every harsh word, every moment that led us here. I tried to justify it to myself, that maybe this was for the best, that we were too different, too broken to fix. But deep down, I knew I was the one who broke us. I pushed her away when she needed me the most, chased after something I thought I wanted, and ended up losing everything that mattered. Sitting in that empty house, I realized the cost of my actions. I lost my family, my home, and any respect they had for me. It's one thing to make a mistake, it's another to watch it tear everything you love apart. The moment I heard she was leaving, part of me felt like it was the right thing. She knew about me and the AP, even guessed why AP was with me. She thought it was for a green card. Maybe it was true, maybe not, but that wasn't the point anymore. She was gone, with our kids, and suddenly, everything felt too real. She was pregnant when she left. I told her I couldn't handle more child support, suggested she get an abortion. I know how cold that sounds now. She didn't listen, of course. Went ahead with the pregnancy. I didn't ask about it, didn't want to know. It was easier to pretend it was all just happening to someone else. But then the divorce papers came in November. She wanted everything. Sole custody, the house, nearly everything we owned. It hit me then, this was real. She was really trying to take my kids away from me. And the house? I was on the deed, but not the mortgage. She said that since she was paying, she should keep it. That didn't sit right with me. So, I fought back. Told my lawyer I wanted half the house in joint custody. I mean, they're my kids too, right? But money was tight, and she made it sound like I was just after her cash. Maybe part of me was, but it was more than that. It was about not losing everything. Then I dropped the bomb about wanting a paternity test for our second son. I don't know why I said it. Maybe to hurt her, maybe to delay things, maybe because I was scared he really wasn't mine. It was a mess. We didn't talk directly much after that. Everything went through lawyers. She stayed with her parents, who wouldn't even let me near the place. I missed my sons but didn't know how to fix any of it. I wanted to see them, but every attempt felt like walking into a storm. Looking back, I see how messed up it was. Contesting the divorce, the custody, the house, demanding a paternity test, it was all just reactions, not actions. I was trying to hold on to something, anything, without really understanding what I was fighting for or why. It wasn't just about money or pride. It was about not wanting to be the bad guy she saw me as, even if I wasn't sure I wasn't that guy. It was all a mess, a huge mess that I helped create. And as everything spiraled, I kept thinking, what am I doing? But by then, it felt too late to stop, too late to say, I'm sorry, too late to make any of it right. So, I kept pushing, kept fighting, because I didn't know what else to do. I was pacing in the living room when I decided to call her. The court date was coming up, and everything inside me was a mix of dread and desperation. Maybe she'll listen, I thought. Maybe she'll see I'm trying to change. So, I picked up the phone and dialed. She answered, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Hey, it's me, I finally got out. I've been thinking a lot about us, about the kids. They need us both, you know? There was silence on the other end, and then she spoke, her voice cold, really? Now you think about the kids? What about when you left us for weeks, when you chose her over your own family? I tried to explain, to tell her that I messed up but that I still loved our sons. It sounded hollow even to me. I do love them, I insisted. I want to make things right. She laughed, a sad, bitter sound. Make things right? You want to make things right after everything you've done? I could hear the anger in her voice, the pain. I wanted to say something, anything that could fix it, but the words wouldn't come. I know I haven't been there, I admit it. But I want to try, for the kids. That's just it, isn't it? You always say you want to try, but when have you ever actually been there for them? For me? Her voice was rising now. You weren't there when they needed you, and you're not here now. You're just scared of being alone." She was right. Since she left, the silence of the house was deafening. I missed the noise, the chaos, even the arguments. But more than that, I missed them, my family. And now, faced with the reality of losing everything, I was reaching out, not for them, but for myself. "We'll see in court," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'm done talking to you." The line went dead, and I stood there, phone in hand, feeling more isolated than ever. I had tried to reach out, to bridge the gap between us, but all I had done was push her further away. In the days leading up to the court date, I realized that my attempts at reconciliation were too little, too late. She was determined, focused on protecting our sons, on securing a future for them that didn't include me in the same way it had before. Standing in court, watching her fight for them, for everything we had built together, I knew she was right. I had been neglectful, manipulative, and now, I was paying the price. She was strong, unwavering in her resolve, and as the judge listened to our cases, I couldn't help but admire her. She wasn't just fighting against me, she was fighting for something greater, for the well-being of our sons, for a life free of deceit and betrayal. And as the proceedings went on, I realized that this wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of her new life, a life she was determined to make better for our children, no matter what it took. The chapter of US was closing, but she was just starting to write a new one, a better one, for herself and our sons. And as I stood there, watching her stand firm in her convictions, I knew that this was how it had to be. For the first time, I saw clearly the consequences of my actions, and I knew that she was doing exactly